Look, detectives combing through the hood looking for a corpse. Draco hitting, I don't think your body can endure the force. I whipped the fish up with a fucking hanger or a fork. Told that bitch, go ahead, sniff what you want, there's plenty more to snort. I had an outstanding warrant for a short. Turned myself in, rocking Louis and all my jewelry, I wore the court.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hard to Kill back at it. Today, we are pleasantly surprised to have Captain James Byler from Havoc to Actual Lima Company. James, how we doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. Happy to be here. Happy to be having this conversation. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, we also have Captain Dan Donnerstag from Rogue. He was my captain in Afghanistan. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Sir, happy to be here.
So, gents, how are we doing today? I'm super pumped to have you both here. I feel like you guys have a lot of commonalities, and I figured it would just turn out to be some great content. So, once again, thank you for coming, guys. Now, is it a problem the Jersey, New York thing? Are you guys gonna go at it at some point, or I mean, one's Yankees, one's what's the other one down there? Mets, I don't know.
No one knows.
Jets and Jets.
No one knows.
Yeah.
I don't know. They have something against us. We just kind of don't pay attention to them or know they exist.
There we go. There it is.
I mean, listen, I acknowledge that New Jersey is called the armpit of America. And listen, and that's okay with me. You know, it is what it is. It is my hometown. It is my home state, but it is what it is. And listen, I'm not terribly affiliated with any sports team, so no hate against New York, and I have family members in New York as well, so no hate there.
There we go.
And we do also talk alike, so sometimes we can be confused. Long Island, New York, Staten Island, Jersey, you know, it's all, there's a lot of confusion there. So I think it's all about the same anyway.
So
we
James,
drink from the same water.
Yeah.
James, what are you doing now nowadays for work?
For work, I lose money, and it turns out to be a very lucrative thing to do. So seriously, no, I'm a stock trader. I work for one of the large banks. Specifically, to go into the weeds of it, it's called a central risk book trader. So basically, in the era of post-financial crisis, where we have the Volcker rule, large banks aren't really supposed to be warehousing a lot of risk. So anything or any operation or trading function that sort of has an inherent risk component to it is supposed to be centralized, aggregated, sort of managed, unwound.
Gotcha.
That's
okay,
kind of what I do. So,
damn.
Hey, so
go ahead.
Quick question, if I could just. So maybe you can give us some insight as to what happened with this bank in California, because isn't that what they did? They were investing in crypto, but it wasn't the other way around where they invested in or certain crypto stuff, and then that is ultimately what caused it. Or my understanding is maybe they invested in the hyperinflation of crypto, and then it kind of did the other way.
So it was a failure to manage the risk of their business. So there's a few banks that went down, and Silicon Valley Bank being one of them. Basically, they're just a retail bank, but they catered to companies and individuals who are all in sort of like the Silicon Valley tech world, many of them being like crypto people, if you will. The problem is the way you make money as a bank traditionally is you take in deposits from people and then you invest that money in something else. And the difference between what you pay your depositor, like whatever small 0.1% rate it is, and whatever you invest in is kind of your profit margin is what's in between. And they did so in short, to tell you what happened is you had people who weren't bankers managing the 7th largest bank in America. and they did a very bad job of risk management. So it's clear that there were certain concepts basic to me that they just didn't understand, or they were just in complete ignorance of. I don't know. There seems to be a lot of that going on today, where just kind of basic truths are sort of just like, whatever you think.
Facts. Facts.
I asked that question because I thought it was kind of in your wheelhouse, and I feel like, myself included, don't really completely understand exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I think there was some fear that was built up in the for some of these other banks, like Wells Fargo. I know that Wells Fargo had some issues thereafter, and I think there was some fear with a lot of people that was going to happen to their own banks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how has this whole rush to get away from the dollar affected you?
It hasn't yet. I think the dollar as sort of like the global base currency it's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take a long time if it does happen. There's a saying I always like, and I'll explain how it relates to this in a minute, but there's an old saying that what's the difference between a language and a dialect? Well, a language has an army, a dialect does not. And so when you start talking about currencies, like, we don't always think about it this way, but what is kind of ultimately underpinning the sort of safety and stability of whatever system it is, you got a bigger, tougher army.
Ultimately,
like, if you kind of go down the logical order or chain of events enough, you eventually get to that. So as it stands right now, we've got the most powerful military in the world. And the only thing that's really gonna sort of bring us down is not a sort of external challenge. It's us committing suicide, which we seem pretty keen on doing.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
we're definitely flashing some warning signs.
Man. Well, so why the fuck did you join the Marines again?
Since I was a little kid, man, in all honesty though, like, I always wanted to be in the military. In fact, my mom still has my old kindergarten yearbook. And if you look at it, one of the things that we did when we were 5 was we all said what we wanted to be when we grew up. Most kids were like Ninja Turtle, Ghostbuster, something like that. I said the Army. Now,
Really?
this is before I knew what the Marine Corps was, but I just, for whatever reason, for as long as I could remember, just always had just a infatuation with the military and military history. And then as I got a little older, I got to learn, like, okay, well, these are what the different branches are. And quite honestly, I just met Marines and I was like, these are the coolest, baddest dudes. I want to be that.
Absolutely.
So it was really as
I
simple
mean,
as that.
when I think of it, like, I always think of it like I held myself to a higher standard. When I want to do something, I want to do it like the best. And to me, the Marines was just like, the toughest and the most organized, most patriotic of the bunch. And that's definitely why I joined in. I can see it's kind of similar with you. I know we had talked a little bit, and you kind of said that you embodied the feeling, the feeling of being a warrior. And that's something that, I definitely can relate with. I don't know about you, Dan. I never really asked you why. I don't think I ever really got from you why exactly you joined the Marines, Dan. But I'm sure it has something to do with something like that. But okay, so
there's a lot. There's a lot of similarities to James as well. But I will say this, that certainly a motivating factor, more of a motivating factor, and I think, James, you could probably speak to this too, is that I was in my freshman year of college when September 11th happened, and that was certainly a catalyst to, like, kind of speed things up. Originally, I'd wanted to join right after high school and just enlist. I was convinced otherwise. I don't know if that was necessarily a good decision, but it is a decision, and I'm happy that it was made nonetheless. But after September 11th, I was like, you know what? I'm already in college. I'm gonna finish college, and let me get into the Marine Corps. So I don't know, James. I don't know if that was a catalyst for you too, or more of a motivating factor. But for me, I know
Yeah.
it certainly was.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
you were in Long Island, correct?
oh yeah, yeah, they had to, we didn't shut down school. I remember they kept all the windows shut because the smoke and everything from ground zero was blowing east with the
No
wind.
shit.
Yeah, so I remember there was like advisories to like stay inside, keep your windows shut because of all the fumes that were blowing. So as far as what that had for me, is I would say it was rocket propellant. Like I already knew I was going into the Marines. I was in 10th grade at the time. And when that happened, it was just rocket propellant. It was just whatever motivation or drive I had, it
Hmm.
just, went into overdrive.
That's got to be
Yeah,
something as New Yorkers that, I didn't think of that before even asking that question to you both. It's just gonna multiply it by 1,000. I mean, that's home turf for you guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to see something like that, I don't know if now where both of you live, could you actually kind of see? I mean, yeah, you could. Okay,
Yeah.
you
yeah, I
could kind of
can.
see all of that. Okay, gotcha. And
Yeah,
that's
and
got to stick with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
as a
There
young
was,
guy, yeah, go
no,
ahead, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, no.
No, no, I just had, yeah, no, I mean, if there were hills you could go up on top of, I remember we drove that too, and you could sort of see the smoke coming up. So it's not that far away from us. Yeah, yeah, it's personal.
Definitely.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I mean, as the crow flies from here to Manhattan, I don't know. I think it's like 6 or 7 miles. And on the top of my street, you could actually see. You should be able to see the Twin Towers. And then certainly that day, you could see all the smoke and everything. And then for me, especially for me, I remember I was an EMT at the time, and so they were bringing a bunch of folks over from Manhattan, and they were triaging folks from Manhattan over to Jersey hospitals. And so um, I was in Hoboken, where they were ferrying people across the water. And I remember just seeing I mean, that's one of the experiences that I've had that I just cannot, I'll never be able to forget. It was just so impactful in my life. And I remember that and I was like, yeah, similar to James. I was like, yep, well, somebody needs to pay for this. So it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, now, James, you had said that your mother had a very negative visceral reaction to the fact that you picked Marines. Obviously I can
Yeah.
understand that coming from a woman, but was that similar for you, Dan? I mean, when I can imagine just being any family member you find out that your kid's joining the Marines. I'm sure, especially for you guys, college graduates, I mean, they have kind of something envisioned for you, and when it comes to the Marines, I mean, that just puts a blockade right at that. So I mean, how did that go for your family, James?
Um, so I'll give you a little bit more background. So my older brother is in the army, and he still is. And he's 2 years older than me, and he also, since we were young, wanted to join the military and go into the army. And just with our respective personalities, he was more the type A, structured type. I was a little bit more the type B, bit more mischievous type. And so with my brother, it made sense. Like he said, he
Gotcha.
wants to go into the army and everything. My parents were supportive. My dad was like, he was applying to West Point, helping them with applications. When I said I wanted to join the Marines, it was kind of like, yeah, okay, James, yeah, sure, fine. Hey, here are like computing and animation classes, or colleges you can go to. A lot of my high school had elective courses, and all the electives I took were kind of like cartooning, sort of artistic classwork. And so my mom had this idea I was going to do like computer graphics because that's a lot of what I was interested in school. And I was kind of like, no, I want to be a Marine. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll see where this goes. Like, you are going to college first. And I was like, well, yeah. And I think that they thought that, like, at some point I was just going to give it up and not do it. But as like I graduated from OCS and like I was getting closer to graduation, I almost feel like there's a bit of panic in them that they're like, oh crap,
You're
James is
serious.
actually going to do this. He's serious.
Yeah.
So it was like this slow escalation of like, you know, my mom definitely tried to talk me out of it. My grandma tried to talk me out of it. I don't think she ever tried to talk my brother out of it. No, my brother only got words of encouragement, but for whatever reason with me, like, I remember my grandma calling me up on the phone one day. I was in college, and she just starts off the conversation immediately. So what's it going to be, blonde, brunette, or redhead? And I was like, what? She's like, blonde, brunette, or redhead? And I was like, what do you mean, Grandma? Like, what do I have to get you to stop you joining the Marines? Do you want a blonde, a brunette, or a redhead? And I think I said, can I have all three?
That'll do it.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Grandma.
Nice. So you ended up in the Marines.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
But you are correct. It wasn't fully supported by my entire family early on. But they came around to it, and I think once I actually was in and they saw me in uniform, it was something that made a lot more sense.
Absolutely. It's funny
because
because
better than your brother than he looked better than your brother in his uniform because he was in the army.
Right.
Facts. It's funny because you think back at that time when like you bring up, you know, joining the military with your family and how much pushback they gave you, but we were so just steadfast in our resolve to do it anyways. You know, we were just so sure of it, and it's funny just looking back at it now. Like, I don't know what it is, but when you get out of the military, the longer you get out, you just keep thinking about the things that you did while you were in, and it kind of amazes you even more. It's like, oh shit, I did do that. You kind of got to remind yourself a little bit about who you were and what you did. But I don't know. Okay.
A lot of things you didn't expect to do or be able to do.
For sure. Definitely.
And it's like, I'm glad I did it, but I don't think I want to do it again.
Yeah, I can imagine, dude.
A lot of stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we get through OCS. I mean, you got a good taste in your mouth at that point. You thinking it's a good idea? Are you happy with your decision?
Yeah. No, I mean, I came out of OCS incredibly motivated. Like I remember doing a moto run at the end of OCS, like the last physical activity you do is like, it's kind of a slow paced, you know, you're singing cadence. It's sort of like get you motivated, and, you know, it's at the end of OCS, you're doing it. I remember still very clearly being on that run and just feeling one of the rare moments in life where like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like whatever that kind of feeling is, like it was just kind of like this perfect alignment of just where the universe wanted me to be at this point in time. And I came out of OCS extremely fired up. I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to get into the Marine Corps and you know, do it, whatever it was going to be. You know, this was late 2000s. You know, Iraq was winding down. Afghanistan was kind of heating back up again. So I didn't really know what potential deployments were going to be like, but I knew I wanted to be infantry. I wanted to be in the Marines, and that was just kind of this where I was supposed to be in life. That's the best way I could describe it.
Okay. Dan, you
didn't
kind
get
of
beat down at all by
there we go.
By your so we call it in OCS, we call them sergeant instructors. We don't call them drill instructors like you guys do in boot camp. But nonetheless, like, so we don't get beat down like you guys are doing sugar cookies, like you say. We don't get that kind of thing. Our thing is like, hey, you fucked up. Like, okay, cool. Here's a 300-word essay you have to write. And oh, by the way, you have to do it overnight. And then you can get multiple of these throughout the course of a day, and then like you wind up not sleeping at all, and that's
Yeah.
kind of how they haze you a little bit. In addition to, we do PT. We probably run a little bit more than you guys, but we still do this. PT is pretty tough, I think. I remember one of the hardest things that we did in OCS. I don't remember if you ever did this, James, but like we had this big, basically telephone pole, and we had to run an obstacle course. It was like I don't know, 3 or 5 miles long. You remember that? Like that was one of the worst things. I was like, if I don't die now, I'm at some point I will. It was.
Did you do the Quigley at the end of it?
Yes. Yeah. And then they have the sergeant. They have the sergeant instructors all around the Quigley, right? And they're telling you like, say my name under the water, right? I don't know if they did the same thing for you. Like, say my name. No, like, and you would say it, and then they're like, no, not above water, underneath the water. So you get underneath the water, you say their name and shit like that, and like.
You got to explain this a little.
You're not.
Explain this a little bit. What is the Quigley here?
So the Quigley is, James, you could explain it.
It is a butt crack emerging from Mother Earth. It is just a filthy, dirty, swampy creek in Quantico, Virginia.
Gotcha.
It's almost like this. I remember it being almost this like neon green kind of color. I don't know if my memory changed that, but I just imagine it's like what the water looks like after a radioactive spill.
Nice.
You can't see into it or through the water at all. You could see like the surface just because how dense the crap is. And it's what you crawl through as part of the obstacle course.
Oh, nice.
I will say, you're tired and overheating because it's always at the end of like when you do an endurance course or obstacle course, they make you do it. And you have to crawl through it and go underwater, and it's disgusting. It smells. But when it's the middle of summer and you're hot and probably borderline heat exhaustion, you will jump into that swamp so fast.
Yeah, I bet.
Not care.
Oh, nice.
In addition to that, they have to they throw flashbangs in the Quigley, and these, I guess they're essentially ponds, to kill off any snakes or rodents that are in there before you get in there.
Great.
Yeah.
So they do that, and then you get in there. And yeah, it's right. It's like almost like the sewage of Earth in this pond. It's really great.
Well, I'm sure you'll be about to hear commercials about that in a couple of years. It won't be the Lejeune water; it will be the Quantico Quigley water.
Yeah,
I'm surprised it hasn't yet. How is that what I'm getting emails about? Like water at Camp Lejeune? Like, have you not been to Quantico? This is the easy.
Oh, shit.
I was sick for like 3 months after I left OCS. I don't know about you. I was just sick. I had like this cold, this lingering cold for like 3 months after I left. I could not kick it. It was at both times that I went. It was the strangest thing.
I was one of the candidates that got cellulitis in my elbow.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and it swelled up. My nickname was Popeye because my forearm swelled up so much from the cellulitis. And I eventually ended up having to go to Bethesda to get a surgery on my arm to get it cut open so they could because the infection got really bad. And like it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we can put you on sick. It was towards the end of OCS, so it's like we have one last hike left, and the conditions is like, well, to pass OCS, you have to do the hike. And it's like, well, if I can medically drop now and start over from day one, or I can just suck it up, get through the hike, and graduate after that. I chose the latter. I said, F this, I am not doing OCS again. I'm not going back to day one.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
But with that, it's an exhausting event, and my elbow got considerably worse afterwards. And I think, you can kind of sort of see a scar.
I heard cellulitis is some nasty shit, man. Like it can get really, really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and then inevitably, what happens is it could spread, and then if you're unlucky enough, it'll go to your bones, and then you have a real issue.
No bueno.
No.
So, James, at one point, I don't know if it was in your bio or I think we had talked for a little bit offline, but I liked how you said that in all professions, effectiveness lies in a balance of art and science. Unpack that for me a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think any craft, anything can sort of be expressed in two different ways, even art itself and even science itself, which is that there's a scientific component to anything, such that, look, the universe follows certain rules and certain laws. Like there's gravity, things weigh a certain amount. There are certain structures and constants that exist in the universe that you always have to respect. There's forces of nature you always have to have respect for and always have consideration for. But then in terms of how you actually go about operating something, whether it's, say, the military or being a trader on Wall Street, there is an art component to it, in that, like, it's an expression of your own interpersonal thoughts and feelings about things. It's your art, whoever you are and what you're doing, sort of will come forth unconsciously in how you actually go about a given activity. So I kind of say that because, you know, people think of, say, the Marine Corps, for instance, as being just a purely sort of rigid, structured thing. And I don't think that's true. I think the structural aspect of it, in terms of, like, there are rules, like, from day one, you learn to do drill to sort of like, what I've always believed, or why we do that, is to sort of like give the mind structure, so that every little activity, everything you do has structure to it. And so from day one throughout all your career, yes, there is a lot of rigid hierarchy structure. There's rules to how you do things. But what people don't realize is how much art there is in it as well, in terms of the profession of, I guess you could say, being a warrior. And it's actually the way you become a better artist in your profession is by establishing a stronger structure. So it's that discipline that gives you intellectual freedom, is sort of how I think about that. And I was always so surprised, or the thing I didn't expect coming into, like, the Marine Corps is, especially as an officer, is how much value there was for thought, what you think about things. Or at least I always had a good commander. I always had a good boss, and, you know, he always cared about how I thought about things. And in turn, like, I always cared about how my NCOs thought about things. I always wanted to include them in planning. If I was ever coming up with a plan, and, you know, look, sometimes you don't have the time. It's got to be like, hey, everyone, shut the F up. We're going. But that's because of time constraints. If you have the luxury of time, bring people in, get them around the round table, you know, throw some thoughts on, you know, how to go about something. I always want to see people think. I don't want to see people be robots. And from the outside of, if you've never been exposed to the military, it can seem like you're being turned into this robot. But to quote Full Metal Jacket, the Marine Corps doesn't want robots; it wants killers.
Wow.
You know, and that's the truth.
Facts.
You know, we don't want robots. You know, we want living, thinking, breathing human beings whose mind is oriented towards, well, killing the enemy.
Absolutely.
And that was kind of a pleasant surprise. I think I'd sort of learned in my time in the Marine Corps, is that, yes, there is this very strong emphasis on discipline, but it's that discipline that enables you to be creative, or that enables you to apply the ideas behind what you want to do, you know. So that's a little bit of what I meant there.
I love that, man. You know, it's funny that you say that, because the first time I saw that in the Marine Corps was through Donnerstag, was when I deployed with him, and how he would just go about our day to day. And he really the first time I really saw an officer working one-on-one, just sanctimoniously and in just this perfect rhythm, was with Sergeant, or at the time he was a Corporal Cervantes that was with us. And I don't know if you can give him a little bit on that, Dan, just to tell him about that a little bit. But as a Lance Corporal, it was as a junior Marine, it was just great for me to see that, to see how things can work just perfect if you just have an open mindset on things and bring everyone to the table like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'm very lucky. I had the team that I had, Nick included. But yeah, I think what you're talking about is like a couple things: humility. One, knowing that you don't know everything, and then that some of your guys that you do have, especially some, I had some Lance Corporals there was a couple Lance Corporals that had deployed previously, corporals that had deployed previously, and a couple of sergeants that had deployed previously, along with some staff sergeants. And so I had deployed previously as well, but I knew I didn't know it all. Especially I was an artillery officer, and here I am in this provisional infantry setting. So I know enough to know that I don't know everything, and I'm asking these guys for different stuff. I have lance corporals and corporals that are doing classes, how to PM guns, and my corpsmen are doing classes for triaging and medical stuff, and then I have my staff sergeants that are doing other stuff, and my lance corporals are really just kind of holding everything together. And and I guess for me it was just about just kind of overseeing everything and letting all these guys do what they needed to do. But for sure, I was actually more blessed than anything, because I had a lot of very, very competent individuals, very competent Marines. But for sure, and I think the other thing I wrote down is imagination. Like James hit on it before. We were just talking about art and the science aspect. And Condoleezza Rice said this after 9/11, and it was a failure for the intelligence community to be imaginative about what could possibly happen. And when you lack that imagination, if you're not completely proficient with your skill set, which you described as discipline, and then after that, don't have the imagination how to get better or prevent some of these things, then you have a result kind of September 11th, where we lack that imagination. It's like, how could we be attacked again? But I think, James, I think you said that incredibly well. But yeah.
Now, I know. First, I wanted to get this off. I've been trying to get him on the show for a minute now. Was your first meeting with Tom in OCS? Your buddy Tom Schumann, James?
Not OCS. It was TBS.
TBS.
So
gotcha.
There's 3 different schools you go through, all 3-letter acronyms. Marine Corps loves its acronyms.
Yes, it does.
There's OCS, then TBS, then IOC.
Gotcha.
TBS stands for the basic school, which I guess you couldn't just call it BS, understandably. So the T gets part of the acronym. And then, so I met Tom. I met him in TBS, but I didn't really know him well. We didn't interact much. It wasn't really until IOC that, we were in the same squad together. We were roommates. And that's when I really kind of first got to know the guy.
Gotcha. I watched his interview on Jocko, and I was just, obviously enthralled in him, dude. Like, it was just definitely a hard charger, and master at his craft for sure. It was cool to see him do his thing.
He's clearly grown a lot. It's been a really cool thing to watch that guy's trajectory.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I'm sure you've heard these conversations about it. There's a lot of talk about post-traumatic stress, and that is an important thing to, figure out how to deal with. but there's also post-traumatic strength. And, you know, there are some guys that came out of, you know, that experience that we all had, and they came out stronger. And Tom is definitely a guy that, you know, it was like squirting lighter fluid on a campfire. He just took off, you know.
Damn, I've never heard that put like that before. I like that.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit something about him. And did you deploy with him, or did you just was he just in the same AO as you?
No, both. So we were both platoon commanders in 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I was a platoon commander in Lima Company. He was a platoon commander in Kilo Company. We were both deployed to Sangin District. Lima Company was south of sort of the district center. Kilo Company was kind of northeast of it. So we didn't overlap on deployment. But you know, being in the same battalion, being lieutenants, we see each other a lot. The command posts are pretty small, and there's not that many lieutenants in the battalion. So yeah, you do spend some time, together.
Gotcha. Okay. So I kind of want to get into a little bit about deployments, if you will, and kind of feel out how Afghanistan was for you. I mean, I know that's kind of a touch and go thing, but if you will, take us from now where after you're done completely with OCS, or no, not OI. Oh,
IOC.
OCS. I'm sorry. Listen, I just do boot camp. Okay, I don't have the 3 levels like you guys. All right.
Listen, I screwed up too, man. I still get it wrong.
Anyways, so you're done with the boot camp stage. We get into the fleet. Where do you settle at?
Okay, so I get assigned to 3-5 along with a bunch of other lieutenants from my graduating IOC class, and so move out to Southern California, and we have a buildup of about a year we weren't sure if it was going to be a MEU or a deployment. So we did a Bridgeport Winter Mountain Warfare training package. I got sent back there for like the Winter Mountain Leaders course for 6 weeks. And let's see here. So that was September 2009. I got to my unit. And then we deployed there in September 2010. It was about a one year buildup.
Okay.
And so, it's weird. I look back, and I think that year might be one of the best years of my life, if I'm being honest. And I know that's a funny thing to say, at least up until the point where I got to Afghanistan. Just that year out in California, having a platoon of Marines that I was in charge of, we were doing these training exercises like going to Bridgeport, which if you've never had the privilege of doing that in the wintertime is miserable, but kind of cool at the same time. But it was just a really special time in my life because I was doing exactly what I wanted to. Having a platoon of Marines was really cool. The NCOs I had were solid guys. They'd all done several deployments to Iraq. They were all combat experienced. They knew their stuff. My platoon sergeant had done several combat tours to Iraq. Solid guy. My company commander, really solid guy. It was a lot of, I was surrounded by people that I admired, and I felt just truly lucky that this was the group of people that I got assigned to. So I was very proud of it, and I loved coming up with PT plans for my platoon and just slaying them.
Thrashing them around.
Yeah, I found out I didn't really do the sort of Silky's death runs, but I was a big fan of sort of like coming up with these very sadistic CrossFit style workouts. Um, uh, and I had a lot of fun with that. And I come to find out years later that, that was, if Lieutenant was leading PT the next morning, everyone went to bed early. Like no one was
They didn't
drinking. It
fuck
was
around.
like,
Yeah.
no, no. But it was just because it got to a certain point where I learned that they loved that. They loved the thrashing, and if you do it in the right way,
Of
like
course.
the problem I always had with sort of like the death runs where you just run really fast and you have that long string of fallouts is, you don't want to thrash them in a way that you're kind of sending this message of like, you're my bitch. Like you're not doing it in a way to sort of like establish authority, like, hey, look, I'm the toughest, fastest, whatever. Like they know you're strong, they know you're fit. Like you're not teaching them anything there. Um, you want to push them harder psychologically than they think they could, or at least that day they woke up and wanted to be lazy, and I'm not going to let you. And when you push them beyond what they previously thought they could do, they will love you for it.
Facts.
They come out of it stronger than they were before because they not because they're physically stronger, but because they're mentally stronger from getting through it. So that I always found PT to be a medium that's very good for teaching that sort of thing, for sort of like building psychological resilience. Yes, you're trying to establish certain standards of, athletic requirements for the job, you could say. But really, what I want to do is build you psychologically. I want to toughen you up mentally. And I always found that to be a good medium. I'm sorry, I got completely off track.
No,
With
no, no, dude. No, that's exactly what I wanted to hear,
That was
man.
not the question you asked me. Okay, so I get to Afghanistan,
Hold
and
on,
I'd
hold on.
read
Let me
up a
let me
little
let me
bit.
slow you down real quick, just because it's
Okay.
fun. I love that you just said that because I mean that just shows me that you completely understand what you're doing. I mean, that's exactly what you need to do as an officer is teach your guys something and bring them together through some kind of medium. And it's funny because you had told me that initially that your personality wasn't, suited to be successful in the military. It took experience, trauma, and for a lack of better words, suffering to learn to, step up your game to be, an adequate infantry officer. But hearing that right there, I mean, fucking A, man. I mean, that's exactly what I feel like I would want one of my infantry officers doing is slaying my guys, but making it a teachable moment and bringing them together at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And you touched on it. I mean, listen, I growing up, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but I was more of a type B personality. I think I'm more inclined towards the arts than anything else. That's just my natural personality. Why I still was drawn to being a warrior, I don't know, man, but it's what I want to do. And so learning sort of, I guess, what you could call the science of it, the discipline and structure was a painful road for me. I learned a lot of things the hard way. I'll tell you right now, TBS, I was IOC, like I was not at the top of my class. I was always in good shape and I could always physically handle things, but just the way of thinking that they want and sort of the structure behind it didn't really naturally come to me. Now, I think partially because of that experience, once I got to the fleet, I had that sense of urgency that I just really, really wanted to be better and get better. And I think finally, when I got to the fleet, I was able to deliver on that. So I know that's not a lot of specifics I gave you, but kind of a general source of or sense of my
I see you.
trajectory.
I see you. Okay. And you also said that being assigned your first platoon and getting to the fleet, I mean, you had kind of a paranoia with your NCOs. I mean, you didn't know if you were coming across the right way, or maybe you were being too friendly, or I mean, that's a tricky thing. It's not the easiest thing to do, man. You get in front of a bunch of guys that, you know, are best of friends because they deployed a bunch of times, and they have a bunch of stories between each other. I mean, that's not the easiest thing to do, to just come in between them and be like, all right, I'm the big dick now. You know what I mean? Like, you got to embody it. And I can understand that a little bit. So what was that like, you know, just that first time, you know, coming in front of these guys and being like, you know, I'm in charge now?
Yeah. So I heard enough accounts of young buck lieutenants, you know, doing the good old fashioned death run, where it's just like, all right, day one of PT, you just run as fast as you can, and really you're just kind of establishing authority. So I really wanted to avoid that. I basically, you know, showed up for PT. That's where I met my platoon, was right before PT. I talked to them a little bit, and we just did kind of a, I guess, CrossFit style workout that my platoon sergeant had already put together. So I wasn't really leading it yet. So I'd say I kind of dipped my toes into things and sort of, I guess it wasn't like this one grandiose moment where I'm like, you know, I am captain now. Look at me. Like, it was, I didn't really do that. It was kind of a slow easing into the pool kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I mostly just tried to find excuses to get in front of them and talk.
Gotcha.
You know, I think it's just that experience of seeing someone talk in front of you, where you get to know who they are, you get
Yeah,
to
of course.
see who they are. And I think that's a valuable thing, just in person. I mean, nowadays in the corporate world, don't even get me started on it. Like, the number of times someone 4 feet away from me, like, sends you an email, and I'm just like, can you just turn around and talk to me? It's like, you know, and just management not getting in front of people and talking. It's like, you just get in front of your people and talk. Like, that's such an important thing. Like,
Absolutely.
oh man, like, just get up in front of people and let them see who the hell you are.
Yeah, goes a long way.
I feel like that's probably one of the quickest ways to earn somebody's respect, and to get to know people. Just like, hey, do a little bit of talking and let people talk, like, and talk to you.
Yep.
And I don't know. I worked a little bit in the business world, and there is definitely a lack of that. Even a little bit in my current job, there's a little bit of that, and it makes for some tough times.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, because this was kind of one of my own fears about going into the fleet and showing up as a brand new butter bar being second lieutenant.
I know.
Come
on.
That for
Hey,
everybody that's not familiar,
someone making popcorn in here. I smell butter.
somebody not familiar, but yeah, one of my fears is, like, you know, I didn't want to, like, yeah, you said, like, how do you gain people's trust and respect, and, you know, establish yourself. I don't want to say establish, it sounds bad, but just establish yourself as a leader, you know. How did you go about that when you first entered the fleet? You know, you don't want to look like the Captain Sobels from Band of Brothers. You know, you want to be like Captain Winters from. So how did you, like, what did you do specifically besides the PT?
You know, I don't think it's like this one defining moment that earns it. I think it takes time. I think earning that trust and respect always, it's a slow process. It's a slow grind. It's not like you get up, give this big, you know, pat and war speech, and, you know, that's how you get there. I think in truth, it's kind of a quiet thing. It's the daily grind of you getting up in front of them, showing resilience, showing control, and making good, intelligent decisions. I think in truth, it happens over a period of time, for your guys to really earn that level of trust, that you need. So I think being successful and earning the trust of my guys was not anything I did consciously. I would say first off, I had it very easy. My NCOs, platoon sergeant, my command, they were awesome. They made it very easy. My platoon sergeant, Jake Sandal, I love to this day. Still talk. I still FaceTime with him sometimes. You know, he's an awesome, amazing guy that made my life very easy. My NCOs were awesome guys that made my life very easy. And all I really had to do was show competence and care. Like, you know, I valued their input. I, you know, showed that I cared about troop welfare. I was going to take care of them. And I showed that I was competent enough to make good decisions. And outside of that, you know, they made it easy. You know, they made me want to come to work. They made me want to do well because I wanted to give them a good lieutenant. I've heard it, like, it sounds so cheesy, but that the most important part of leadership is loving your guys. Like, you have to care.
The fact.
Because if you have that love, then from there you will make all the decisions necessary to be a good leader. Like, you will, if you care, you will make sure that you're competent. You will make sure that you're giving them good training, that you're making good decisions, that, you know, you yourself are enough of an athlete to do a good job. Like, because from that sort of seed of love, whatever you want to call it, whatever cheesy metaphor, you will make sure that you are good at your job.
Well,
almost like a father figure type, you know, the disciplinarian versus, you know, the loving father, but also has to be the kind of disciplinarian type. I understand that. Well put.
Yeah. Definitely. I think it really just comes down to we just want someone that represents us on a level that we can just always get behind. You know, I mean, because you got to think your word always gets broken down by the staff NCO, and he's got to back you. He delivers that to us, and then we see him, you know, locking you in and getting behind you. Then it comes down to us. Then we're like, all right, staff sergeant's rocking with him. We're going to rock with him. We're going to make him look good too. Because that's kind of like a representation of us a little bit. And, you know, it just goes downhill like that. But okay. So, all right. So we get through some training evolutions with the guys. And I think at this point, you guys are really coming into one. You're starting to sharpen all the edges and, you know, really feel each other out, know what you have, know who's in what positions, and you're getting ready. You're getting ready for the game. And so the drums are beating and Afghans on the horizon, man. Give me your mindset. What's going on when you're going over there? What's the word? How the NCOs click in? Talk to me.
Well, the platoon's, you know, well tuned like a fiddle. Like, that's not a concern for me. We knew we were going to Afghanistan, but it wasn't until I don't know, maybe 2 months out that we knew specifically where we were going. And I don't know, like, I'd heard stories of other guys who'd done like pumps in certain parts that were less kinetic. And I think in my mind, I had this assumption of like, we're either going to go on a MEU or we're going to do something low intensity. And then we learn about Sangin, where we're going. And then I start reading like the intel reports from, at the time it was a British AO.
I thought so.
Like, it was,
I thought so.
Yeah, it was all, I think the British paras were covering that AO. There's a few different units. I think 40th Commando rotated through. But I started reading some of the reports and it was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this story that keeps escalating and getting worse.
It gets worse and worse. Yeah.
Like, shit. Wait, this is happening? Like,
yeah.
Like, how many IEDs you found and what? Holy shit. Like, And then
Were
I'm just
you
like, wait, this is where we're okay. All right, well, good thing we've been taking training seriously. This is gonna get real. Like, are you sure this is real? Like, is that a mistake? Did they get a digit wrong? Like,
James, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding with 3-5, the British had basically consolidated all their combat outposts into one big base, big outpost. And then 3-5, you guys, my understanding is you guys reestablished all those other small combat outposts where
yeah.
maybe there was like a squad here, squad there, squad in a different location. Is that
So,
right?
yeah, so kind of two things happened when we got there. One, 3-7 actually came there first, right before we got there. They were at the very tail end of their deployment, and they were there about, I want to say about a month, less than a month, maybe. And so one of the things happening is, well, yes, you are correct. The British had gotten into a very defensive posture. And it wasn't just one base, it was like a small number of bases that they had sort of consolidated into. Patrols are very limited, usually going out within, eyesight from the base that they're patrolling from. Effectively, I don't know if it's because the decision had already been made to sort of hand over control to the Americans. I know that politically, the situation in Sangin was deeply unpopular over in Britain. So for various reasons, they had taken on a very, very defensive posture. The Taliban took a lot of advantage of that and sort of built these IED rings around the bases. So 3-7 came in and they were kind of the first to start, like, so you had two battalions. You had the Brits and then you had 3-7. And so there was this surge of troop presence and they were able to, spare enough personnel to start patrolling. So 3-7, I mean, I think in that 1 month they took more casualties than the entire deployment.
Yeah, I heard that.
So they were definitely getting after it for even that short amount of time they were there. Then we got there, and then, not only did 3-7 and the Brits leave, they handed over to us. So now we're shrinking down to one battalion, but then we're also going to continue aggressively pushing out. And so that was sort of the strategy that we adopted, is like, get out of the FOBs, go set up some local patrol bases and then start patrolling outside of those. Like, we're getting out there, we're getting after it, we're regaining control of this area of operations. So I get into Sangin, and that's what we did with my platoon. Is we actually initially broke my platoon into sort of 3 squads that operated sort of interdependently, but separate. And so one of my squads was sort of like a QRF for our company's forward operating base. One of my squads was in a patrol base that was co-located with a company of Afghan National Army. And that's where I inserted myself and spent my time. Was in this patrol base with the ANA, which was an adventure all unto itself. So it was sort of more of this sort of model of, breaking out into sort of satellites, at least with my platoon. And the day-to-day operations was sort of aggressive patrolling. And then our company would occasionally do like clearing operations through neighborhoods and sort of try to push out our presence further. But it was really that first sort of 2 months where we took the overwhelming majority of our hits. I mean, in any deployment, it's always the beginning and the end where you take most of your casualties, because, well, the beginning, when you first get there, you're all John Rambo and you want to go get the bad guys, and you don't have a good sense or feeling of the AO, and you're hyper aggressive and impetuous, and so you make a lot of rash decisions. And so really at the beginning, you should be more kind of pulling the reins. And then at the end, it's complacency because guys are tired and they want to go home. And that's when you need to sort of like light some fires and kick some asses. I didn't make it that long. But that's kind of the nature of any deployment. But I think especially in Sangin, it was particularly acute in the sense that most casualties were at the very beginning. And I couldn't give you statistics or specific numbers, but I know that's when we were losing most of our guys.
So I think you're both in a very unique position where you both were extremely young officers with a lot of responsibility. To be in the position that you both were, because Dan was in a very similar position to you, as he was in a small patrol base with us with a bunch of AHP at his command, and you on your end had A&A. That's a very unsettling feeling to be embedded with these guys. Keep in mind, we're the first kind of hit teams that are getting embedded with these, Afghans, training them, living with them. If you could, both of you kind of weigh in on this. Talk to me about how you're feeling. Remember how old you were at this time, and remember all the things that are going on. What do you talk to me here?
Yeah, I kick that off. I mean, as for like a lot of responsibility at a young age, this is where I think I'm, I guess, against the stigma of our times, and that I think we don't put enough faith into young people in this country. I think we don't respect how capable a young person is. I think that we're too afraid of giving too much responsibility to young people. I think that we're a lot more capable than we think. Like, yes, 100%, you are right. Stepping in front of a platoon of 40 Marines at the age of 24, 25 is intimidating and overwhelming. Going into a war with them is beyond intimidating. You constantly have imposter syndrome, I would say, or I felt that way. Like, there's a little bit of a sense of like, is anyone going to figure out that I shouldn't be the guy doing this? Like, there's that insecurity that's just constantly there, that can be a healthy thing if you channel it in the right way to work harder, which is the healthy way to deal with it. And then getting into country, and you're going to be co-located in a patrol base with a company of, so you're going to be outnumbered by like 6-1 in a patrol base with a bunch of A&A. And by the way, sometimes these guys are moles working for the Taliban, so good luck out there. Deeply unsettling, terrifying. There's no training for how to do that.
No.
You have to go with it. There's maybe 2 Afghans who spoke English. One of them was my interpreter. The other one was this guy who had lived in London for a number of years working in a bakery, and I guess came back home to fight for the ANA. So he spoke British English very well with I don't know if it's Cockney accent, but it was kind of a funny thing, really. It was this Afghan dude with kind of like this rough British accent. So there's like 2 people you can even talk to directly, and I don't know. It's crazy. It's insane. But
it's like Patty the Batty with the Afghan National Army.
Yeah, seriously.
the Scouser.
Yeah, Scouser.
Scouser Afghan. Yeah, no, James, I think man, you hit it on the head. And I think I probably addressed this before, but I think the Marine Corps does a very good job of training us and instilling confidence in us. I feel like I don't have that confidence like I used to have, that's for sure. But the other thing I also believe is that if you're given a task, I think 90% of people could, for the most part, especially in the Marine Corps and with the right mindset, will be able to accomplish that task. And so like James, he goes out and sang and, arguably probably the first dudes to clear that whole area since the Brits came in. You think of this task and how big it is. But but you know that's the task that you have. That's what you're going to do, and you do it. And I know that 3-5. I mean, there's books all about 3-5
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
3-5 is, I mean, firstly, I did want to mention this. I didn't mention this before, but James, honestly, man, thank you. Thank you for your service, man. Thank you for your dedication to this country, man. You are the kind of people that make this country as great as it is. And you're the kind of guy that makes great Marines as well. So thanks for being a patriot. Thanks for being a great Marine. Thanks for being you, man. I'm not going to say thank you for being a Long Islander, but
You should never thank anyone for being a Long Islander. Just coming from one. There's nothing to thank there.
But yeah, you're given a task, and I think again with the Marine Corps' attitude, you take that on with the things that you're taught, with the individuals in your platoon, all very capable individuals, as I know that I had, and you just do it, and I guess you don't really think about it, and that's the way that I look at it. And yeah, I agree with James. I'm like, when are these dudes gonna figure out I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, Not terribly the case, but it's like there is a lot of confidence issues, and you settle it, man, and you start getting to a groove, and you start figuring things out, and you're like, okay, I'm picking this up, like I'm figuring this out. And then eventually, like Nick has always said, like, we started working like a really well-oiled machine at that probably after the first month together, and that's basically the answer. Definitely. And worked for us, right, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely.
For the most part.
Yeah, I know, right? Something I think Dan had a lot of success with on our deployment was really conjuring and creating a great relationship with our interpreter. I know I heard Tom talking about a little bit on his podcast with Jocko as well. And I really think there's a lot of importance that people need to understand about not only how much they're sacrificing being, interpreter for us and working with us, but the way they interpret things. They could interpret it 1,000 different ways, but they're telling you exactly what someone's saying in their dialect, and a lesser interpreter could miss certain things and totally misconstrue what a local is saying or someone in a SURE is trying to get across to you. So I think it's really, really important that you have that individual on your side and really, really understand and know him. And I think that's really what you had with Stone, man. And he definitely showed us that, he was a very more than capable tool for us. Did you have any kind of similar relationships with your interpreters, or did they kind of give you just a run of the mill, just your British bakery guy?
There was a disparity of interpreters, but yeah, listen, first and foremost, those guys are gold. Like, they are more valuable than gold, because you can't accomplish the mission that we're being given without them. It is a counterinsurgency mission. If you don't have someone that can not only speak the language, but understand the culture, like, again, it's one thing to directly translate text. It's another thing to understand all the sort of meaning behind what's being said and what's being communicated. It's another thing to be able to understand the culture and what's going on. So you are dead in the water without an interpreter, without someone there. And they are putting themselves and their families at complete risk. It's an awful tragedy how that story ended, because those guys didn't deserve it.
I know. I think we all feel that way.
It sucks, but you're right. We cannot thank those people enough. We cannot do enough for them. If there is any hope of still getting any more guys out of there,
Yeah,
I think we have a moral obligation to get as many out as possible, because they are literally putting themselves and their families' lives on the line by doing that job. Yes, absolutely. Every single guy that we got, I have eternal respect for making the decision to do that job. Within that, yeah, there's a disparity of personalities. You know,
definitely. For sure.
There's one guy that I think Tom had, or no, I think it was in Rob's platoon. Yeah, no, first platoon Lima Company had. It was a guy they called Jack the Pirate, because he dressed up like a pirate and he had a sort of rough way of talking that reminded them of a pirate. Like apparently he wore like a bandana and had like a gold earring. And,
nice.
He was very, very rough. So some of these guys are characters like that.
I know.
They're wild dudes. My dude was kind of a funny guy. Because I don't think he fully understood what he was getting into. He didn't, I think, understand the amount of danger he was actually going to be physically exposed to. Like, you know, if there's a tick, it's like, hey, dude, I need you to come up with me. It's like, but there's IEDs and gunshots. It's like, yeah, you're coming with me, dude. I need you. He's like, no, it's dangerous. It's like, yeah, I don't care. I need you. But he always did. He ultimately did what was asked of him. But he definitely had kind of a shy personality. It took a little bit to sort of get him out of his shell. Yeah, it was kind of funny early on because I don't think he fully comprehended what he got into. I think maybe whoever sold the job to him kind of described it like being some kind of summer camp where he'll get meet Americans. It was kind of the impression I got. But you know what? God bless him because he still did his job. He
absolutely
did everything that was asked of him. So he still has my eternal respect.
Okay. Dan, tell him a little bit about you and Stone, man.
Yeah, you know, I think we had a super deep connection. I actually kind of stolen from a different platoon. There was an adjacent training team that was kind of leaving the area, and I bartered a trade. Wasn't really supposed to happen, but it happened. So before I actually got Stone, I worked with him a little bit with this other training team before our team got set up. And then, you know, just kind of working with this other team, established that this dude was the dude. Was a very effective communicator, translated everything like on point. So I knew that I wanted this dude. So I bartered a trade, we got him, and then we ran from there. And like the Marine Corps says, you know, the most important thing of warfare is really communication. And without that communication, you're dead in the water. So we had that. I mean, that was the first thing. We had Stone, Shafiullah Hakimi. He's supposed to be coming on hopefully.
Hell yeah.
I've been kind of talking to him back and forth. Yeah. So I don't want to tell a story. I think he'll have time to tell his story. But yeah, so we established this connection. I learned right off the bat that he was trustworthy because he kept getting people kept threatening him and screaming at him, you know, in Dari and Pashto. And like, oh, what is going on, man? Why are all these people yelling at you like this? And then eventually he finally told me, like, yeah, his life was getting threatened. And then, you know, Stone, why aren't you telling me this, man? So he finally wound up telling me this. But you know, I'm telling you, he was awesome, and he was so good. You know, other teams were trying to get him. Lucky for Stone though, unlucky. He went through his IED experience with us. Was medevaced in his own little way, but he got one of these SIVs, these special visas, special immigration visas, and he came to America, and he lived with me for like 3 years, and then he eventually applied for his citizenship, got his citizenship, and now he's back interpreting.
I know, crazy.
But it works out for him, and he's got a whole family and everything.
Yeah.
But he was absolutely key to our operations, no doubt, absolutely no doubt.
Just some of the situations that I saw you get into him with him, like we got into some fucking bizarre situations over there, and I know everyone does, but we saw some weird shit, like people getting kidnapped and big congregations of Shuras, everyone yelling at each other. You could tell just odd shit was going down. And for Stone to just navigate through all this and just still have his fucking head on his shoulders, man. I mean, come on. Not everyone can say that, especially in that AO. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Props to him.
People had it out for him, man.
Yeah.
People had it out for him. To the point where he came to me and he told me he was scared because he thought that people were going to kill him. Said,
yeah.
Don't worry, but we got you.
We got you.
And luckily, he did get his whole family out, so his whole family's good. That is one of those success stories. Unfortunately, like James was saying, it is one of the few, and there's still a bunch of interpreters that are still over there, kind of, hopefully they're still alive, because I know a lot of them probably didn't make it out.
Yeah.
I'm just being real. But he is one of the success stories where him and his entire family got out.
I can't imagine some of these other guys that like put their life on the line for us, and then they see that plane incident in Kabul, like, oh fuck, like.
But it wasn't chaotic. Apparently, it wasn't chaotic.
Yeah.
I don't want to get political, but it wasn't chaotic.
Whatever stool pigeon they put on the stand to tell that story. Come on. Oh man. All right. So I know this isn't one of the best topics for either of you to tell, and Dan, I'm going to ask you to go first, because James new to the show, and he likes to dip his feet in the water slowly, as I've heard. Yeah. So
no pun intended.
Yeah, yes. I didn't want to say that.
I love it. Don't stop.
Okay, all right. So Dan, we're getting towards the ladder of our deployment, and we're down motherfucking Route 606, and we take a sharp right off towards the last PB, and we didn't end up coming back with you, man. Could you talk about it a little bit? I know it's a shitty topic, but what you remember, what you saw, just give us the layout, if you would.
Yeah, no, we talked about this before, and it was April 4th, 2011, and probably the hardest thing for me at that point was knowing that I had to leave. So long story short, so I'm going to give James the airtime here, but long story short, we were on a mounted patrol, kind of going to an area where we were investigating an IED lab. Got our intel, whatever we got for the day. And then we're leaving after we got some good intel. And we're I told Cervantes, hey, listen, Rafael, just go a different way. I don't care which way you go, just go a different way so we don't take the same route, blah, 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 so that we're not back late. So he goes a different route, and we just, it was just unfortunate. I don't know what happened. Did somebody kind of surveil us the entire time? And just, I don't really know. But it doesn't really matter at this point. But we wound up in an IED. I sustained some injuries, and then I had to leave. And again, the hardest thing for me was having to leave that day and leaving my team, because like you said, James, it's like there's this love and connection that is established, So at this point, I was in the country for 5 months. We did like a 2-month workup in Mojave Viper. So 7 months in, we established this relationship, and I'm telling you, like, I loved each and every one of these guys, like they were my family. And that was probably the hardest part, aside, even more so than some of the physical injuries. So that's kind of my story. It's very brief, but James, I'll let you kind of take over.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, this was on a dismounted patrol. So my patrols were all dismounted. Now my sort of, or our company sort of AO in Sangin was broken into sort of two main sectors we called Green Zone and Brown Zone. Green Zone was the west side of like the one road that went through Sangin, and it was close to the river, so that's where all the farms were. There was, irrigation and
James, is Sangin more like wadis and farms, or is it more like bizarre village type mud huts everywhere? I never really. I kind of got different stories on it. What did
a
you
little
see?
bit of both. A little bit of both. So the west side of the highway, it's not a highway, it's a freaking dirt road. You can barely drive anything
Yeah,
down.
no shit.
Wasn't even paved when I was there, but we called it a highway. And the west side of that was close to the river. And so anything near the river, there was some there was a good amount of greenery and trees and stuff like that. So we called that the green zone. And it's funny because we deployed with two sets of camis. If you were going, you might one day go on a patrol in the green zone, wear your green camis.
Gotcha.
If you're going to go on patrol in the brown zone, you wear your
Forward
desert.
thinking right there. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And then there's the brown zone, which is east of the highway. And anything away from the river is just arid desert. And this area east of the highway, but close enough to the town, it was all mud huts and complexes. And this area had largely been abandoned. It's where there had been a lot of fighting over the years. So most people who lived there left. And there were IEDs everywhere. So, that was another reason, you don't want to live in a neighborhood if there's a crime problem. You definitely don't want to live in the neighborhood where there's an IED problem.
No.
So most people had moved out of this
Gotcha.
neighborhood. So it was just kind of like, bombed out, crappy, just mud huts and IEDs that were kind of everywhere.
Gotcha.
I remember my first patrol we went on. I don't know how many. I want to say we found 7 IEDs.
Your first patrol? Shit.
Yeah. So that was like day one, and it was like my left seat, right seat with the platoon commander I was taking over from, and we just kept finding them. And I was like, wow, day one, okay, here we go.
Were the IEDs that you were finding, were they all similar? Like, did it have some kind of SOP that they were following, you think, like pressure plate, or were they remote deading, or what were you seeing over there?
Yes and no. So it depended. There was a cluster of IEDs we found that were all the vast majority of them were the same pressure plate. So it was the same compound of like, you have the homemade explosive, which is usually from fertilizer and a number of other substances they put in it to make it incendiary and explosive. You have a battery source and then a pressure plate, which is just 2 blocks of wood. They put sponge at the end of it to make it squishy. And on the interfacing sides of wood, it's either really, really thin copper wiring, or sometimes they even use like carbon rods. The reason they do that, what's actually brilliant about this system, is that the only way we really have to sort of find the IEDs is with like the metal detectors, like those things you see old people with at the beach looking for change. That's what we're using in fucking Sangin to find bombs.
Oh, man. The fuckery.
Yeah, and so, but that's kind of where the Taliban was really sort of brilliant in prepping the battle space, because you think it's not a munition made in a factory, so it must be like cheaper or ghetto or redneck, but it's not. It's actually more effective than a landmine that you buy in a factory, because they're all kind of custom tailored to different wherever they're buried. Now, most of them are that sort of thing of like pressure plates, but sometimes you get ones that you're just like, my God, did MacGyver put this here?
Yeah.
Like, this is really impressive.
Yeah.
So there was one that I remember on this first patrol that we found where it was it looked like it was an empty like shell that was kind of like in a sack next to an abandoned hut, and it was really obvious. Like, and so it was designed to make you want to go over and check it out.
Gotcha.
But we had this one ANA soldier who was the sergeant major, who was like 23 years old, and clearly he got the job because he was just such a badass.
Yeah.
And this guy had no fear. He was the one finding all these IEDs.
No shit.
Clearly, the dude didn't even have a metal detector. He just had like a pocket knife. Like, he just walk up to the ground. You'd see him like brush away some dust, stick a pocket knife in the ground, cut some cords, pull out a pressure plate, and just go ID. And like, that was this dude. And like, you couldn't control him. Like, he'd go on patrol with me. I never went to get him. We would just form up and he'd start walking with us. And I'd be like, all right, well, I'm not telling him what to do.
Yeah. That sounds like our Rambo. We had a guy just like that, but gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't tell him what to do. He just came and went as he
mind of his own. Yeah.
How that worked. But he was awesome. Like, and so you'd see an alleyway and, you'd start prepping how you're going to sort of clear it. And he would just start walking and, digging into the ground. He'd be like, all right, well, I guess Sergeant Major's got this one. And he would find like 2 or 3 IEDs in one alley.
Damn.
Just dig them out of the ground.
So he really understood.
And then they throw them in the back of their Ford pickup truck and just drive it back onto base. I remember one of our company staff having a heart attack because this truck with like IEDs that haven't been diffused were just driven onto the base. It's just like, everyone back away.
Yeah.
EOT I guess right the Afghans are all the same.
Yeah, they are.
It's like they just cut the pressure plates and then just like drive these bombs on the base. It was hilarious. In retrospect,
fine.
Yeah,
just some plastic.
It was wild, man. But so anyway, yeah.
I guess that's what they're taught when they go to their boot camps. Take it up. Yeah. Put it in the back of the truck.
Yeah.
Bring it to the compound. Yeah. They did it, Nick. I don't remember. They did the same thing. I can't
multiple
times.
So
I was like, no,
times.
You cannot bring this back here. I don't know what you're doing. You cannot bring this back. Please don't dig it up either. Please do yourself a favor. Don't dig it up from the ground.
Fucking savages, man.
Oh my God! It was.
We're gonna blow it up in place. We don't need to take this home.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not necessary.
Exactly.
Oh, shit.
So anyway, but on occasion you would find something like a little bit more clever. I remember talking to an EOD tech one time. He found an IED that was what it was. The detonation system was a water bottle that was partially filled up with water that was slightly covered up with dust. So it was enough that if you saw it, you would go over and like brush the sand away. But what it actually had was a solar light detector in the cap.
What?
So when you brushed away the sand, the sunlight would hit the water, refract off of it, hit the solar light detector, and that's what would send a pulse to the bomb to actually detonate it.
That's scary.
So they sometimes would come up with these things that were actually like something like that's actually designed to get an EOD technician, because it's like the guy who's actually going to be the first one to start working on it. So sometimes you see ones like that, or like this other one. What it was like it looked like it was supposed to be an IED with like a cord obviously going up into the wall. So naturally you want to go inside the building and see where the cord is coming from. But I guess there was another IED in the doorway, or I forget exactly what it was, but that was a sort of decoy that wasn't actually active. There was another IED that was close by where you would naturally want to sort of approach that one from.
Gotcha.
And that was like, they would do things like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Where
Dan found a couple of those actually.
Yeah,
it's funny you say
I found one myself. Stepped right on it.
Savage, man.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of your patrols, you were just going out and you were just finding IEDs.
I know.
One way or another.
Yeah.
And so what happened to me is we go into this, it was in the brown zone, kind of an abandoned neighborhood. We go into this one compound, and we already found several IEDs in it. And so we basically set up cordon. We were gonna, get EOD, sort of, locate any more IEDs that might be there, dig them out, neutralize them. And as we're doing this, like kind of setting up a cordon around this compound, I hear a couple gunshots, and I see two of my Marines go sprinting down an alleyway, and I'm like, fuck, here we go. So I go running down the alleyway after them. We get, I don't know what I want to say, maybe 50 yards, 50 meters, something like that, up this alleyway before we stop. And so I'm with some of my Afghans and a Marine engineer, another two Marines there with me. Now, also, this is, my memory.
No, I hear you.
Prior to getting blown up, so some details may not be exactly right. This is just the best that I can remember it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of taking a tactical pause. I'm trying to get details on like what you saw, like they saw guys who were maneuvering on a shelf. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, we're setting up a basically defensive perimeter. Let's pull back to the compound. We'll set up defense there, but I'm seeing guys who are sort of like overwatching us from this sort of like elevated shelf. And so I'm trying to go up to a wall to sort of like look through my scope to sort of see them and think like, are we about to take contact here? What's going on? Now, what I didn't realize is this alleyway that we sprinted up. Now, it looked well trafficked as long as you stayed down the middle. Like, people clearly were regularly using this alleyway to walk back and forth or fresh footprints. But, I stepped 2 steps off the dirt path as I'm trying to sort of like kneel down and get like sort of visibility on, what I'm looking at. I stepped over, and I guess I had one hand on my radio and my other on my rifle. And I stepped on a pressure plate IED, went off. And some guys, they get hit and they wake up like in Walter Reed in the hospital. I personally never went unconscious.
Oh, fuck.
I don't think that's a blessing. I think you're better off waking up in the hospital.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
So yeah, man, I remember I never lost consciousness. I remember laying on my side, seeing dust everywhere. First thing I saw were my hands, which you can see I'm kind of missing my pinkies. I remember this one was kind of hanging off by like a thread. Like it was kind of like doing one of these things. So it was just like crazy. And like my arms just like shaking like convulsively. And I didn't feel any pain yet. So I reached down and, it was about at the knees that both legs were gone. So I could feel that they were gone. They had to amputate subsequently a little bit higher up, but I remembered seeing that and just like, fuck. Like, yep. Like, I just became a statistic. Like,
fuck.
So, fortunately, 2 of my Marines close by me, I didn't have a corpsman with me or a doc, but they were all combat lifesaver trained. So I would say within a minute to 2 minutes, I had tourniquets on both of my legs and cinched tight. So they did exactly proper first aid for this sort of thing, and they've kept me alive. It was my Marines. It was a Lance Corporal, and then another Marine that was with me that did that. So training works. And the next part of this was kind of funny because we're up like 50, maybe a football field up an alleyway, and they need to get me back to a patrol base at least, or the FOB, so they can land a helicopter to get me in a medevac. And to do that, they're like, all right, well, let's drive them to the base where the helicopter can land. And but the problem is they had to get me to the road to get me in the back of an Afghan pickup to drive me to where the helicopter was going to land. So they were trying to figure out how to get me back to the road. And one of the Afghan soldiers with us, goes, you know what? I got a solution. He sees this kid coming back from the market with a wheelbarrow full of vegetables, who, by the way, is just walking past like a blown up soldier, like nothing happened, just like do 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 do. Like there's a guy missing his legs, and it's and like I guess you guys are kind of used to this.
Yeah.
And so this was the sergeant major. Actually, he runs over to the kid, slaps him, takes the vegetables out, brings it back over. They put me in the wheelbarrow, and then they run me down the alleyway with me like.
You remember this?
In legless in the wheelbarrow, just like bumping along, like.
Oh my God.
And and that was, I mean, you know, I'm still in shock, but that was really painful. Like I just remember that being like really
excruciating,
like bumping in this dirty fucking like wheelbarrow. So then they transfer me in the back of like one of these like Ford Ranger pickups that the Afghans use, and I'm just like in the bedding in the back, and the driver is just like, all right, step on the gas, we got to get this guy to the, you know, base, which is maybe like a mile, maybe a kilometer drive, not far, but this guy's like stepping on the gas, and the problem is it's like freaking mud road, and there's rocks crap, and this guy's flying, so like I'm just like loosely in the bedding of the back of a pickup, and we're just.
You're the only one in the back of the bed.
I'm not cinched down or anything. I'm just.
And nobody else is with you at this point.
Oh no. My squad leader and one of my corpsmen get into the back with me. And so my squad leader, he's like talking to me, but then he realizes one of his duties or one of the jobs necessary is to physically hold me down by the chest to stop me from, when this driver is hitting a bump, to stop me from flying out of the back of this pickup truck. Because I probably would have had a few points, because like, you know, it's such a rough road and this guy's just gassing it. So we get back to the fob, for the company fob. You know, helo lands in very short order. So there was actually a British medevac chopper, Tricky, call sign Tricky, and they were actually already on another mission at the time. They'd been called in for someone who had a less severe injury. I don't know if it was shrapnel or a gunshot wound, but they heard my call come up and said, hey, we're already in the air. We're like 20 minutes out. We can get this guy. Like, I think he takes priority. So they just switched to come and get me. So I was a little confused when I heard a British accent as I was getting loaded onto a helicopter. All good. They were awesome. But anyway, so Kilo lands, and you know, there's some guys kind of around me talking to me. My company gunny, solid guy gunny, D'Alessandro, who, another Jersey guy, but he, or was he from the Bronx? I forget.
Yeah, same thing.
He's gonna yell at me. But yeah, he was there, you know, holding my hand the whole time, just kind of talking to me. And you know, for some reason, I never at any moment thought I was gonna die. You know, if you looked at me, it's like, this guy's fucking dying. But I just had this sense of like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna be okay. I never had a moment that I thought to myself that, you know, this is it, or even what if this is it. I don't know. I don't know why I had that certainty. I really shouldn't have, given the severity of my wounds. There were guys with less severe wounds who didn't make it. You know, there were guys who, you know, had gotten injured and they'd made it all the way back to Walter Reed in the States alive, but because an infection spread, you know, it ended up taking their life. So I don't know why I had that kind of conviction, but, you know, I just always had this kind of comfort that I was going to be okay. But I remember getting loaded onto the helo, and as I was getting loaded onto the helo, there was this feeling of like a sort of weight being taken off of me, like dropping your pack almost. But it was coupled with this sense of like sorrow, like very deep sorrow, that I was leaving the Marines. Like I also knew that this was the end of my time in the Marines. And you know, I felt this sense of like a huge weight being lifted, because it was like I was losing the responsibility of my platoon, but also this deep sorrow accompanied with it because I was losing this part of my life.
You knew what came with it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I knew on that moment getting loaded onto a helicopter that my time in the Marines was done. Like this was it. So
wow. James, I mean, first off, I gotta thank you for even sharing something like that on my platform, man. And second off, I need you to know this isn't just another empty thank you. This is from the bottom of my heart, man. You're a leader that every Marine hopes to get, and you put yourself out on the line 100% for your guys. And thank you. You definitely played the game at 100%, and I'm thankful for you, bro.
I'm thankful for you gentlemen as well. I want to say thank you too. I happen to find myself in the situations that I'm in, but truly, either one of you would have done the same as me, or at least not any worse. Maybe better in some ways. So there's nothing special about me.
I think that's just your humility talking, bro. But I mean, I hear you.
No, I agree, man. You signed on that dotted line at the time of war. You knew what you were getting into. You know, I know Fifth Marines has a certain they're known to be, you know, like it's a badass regiment, you know, and I know specifically 3-5. And if I can remember correctly, 3-5 was tapped specifically to go to Sangin because of the reputation that they've had in the past. Throughout the existence of the Marine Corps. I think in Vietnam, Fifth Marines stood out. I think in Korea, I can't remember specifically, but I know that 3-5 was tapped to go to Sangin, knowing what it was going to be like, because 3-5 and Fifth Marines has a reputation to succeed, and I think that's evident. Speaking with you, James, I think you know, they probably tapped you because you're probably one of the better dudes and going through IOC, and they probably were like, hey, this guy would probably fit pretty well in 3-5.
Yeah.
But I know
I would like to think that. I'm not sure.
No, I know. Hey, you guys, do you wait? Hold on a second. Don't you guys have the? I'm going to say this wrong. The Croix de Guerre, or the what is it? The green lanyard that goes
3-5.
through.
Yeah, it's the.
Is it Fifth Marines that has that?
Yes, it is. It's
what is that?
French Fourragère. No, that's the thing on top of the hat. I forget the name of it, but it's a cord we wear over our shoulder. It's part of our.
And so no other. I think it's Fifth Marines has it. No other regiment in the Marine Corps can wear this, and it was given, I believe, in I might mess this up. I think it was World War II for basically gallantry.
Really?
The French thought we were awesome. They gave it to us. So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
hell yeah.
So
no big deal.
But so that gives you a little bit of a background of, like, no, I'm telling you, Nick, you like when you see somebody that has this, you know, like, okay, so this dude was in Fifth Marines because they're badass.
Gotcha.
And so, you know, again, I met some dudes from 3-5. As a matter of fact, that when I was in Bethesda, there was a dude over there from 3-5. I don't remember what company he was with. But just, man, some of the things that he was telling me alone, and hearing about some of the situations that you guys come up against, and knowing what 3-5 and the casualties that you guys took on, you know, my hat's off to you guys. I mean, there's a small amount of Marines. There's a small amount of Americans that go into the military. There's an even smaller amount of individuals that go into the Marine Corps. Even smaller than that are those individuals that go into combat. Exponentially less than that are individuals that go into units like you've been in. I'm telling you, man, like, when I hear about your story, when I hear about other Marine stories from Fifth Marines, that's like, I'm a proud American, man. I'm a proud American when I hear stuff like that. Like, proud makes me even prouder to say that I'm a Marine because of stories like your own. So, man, again, hats off to you. Thank you so much for your service, and dude, I mean that.
Seriously.
This country would not be where it is today without individuals like yourself, man. And unfortunately, like, we need to carry that shit on. And it's not, and I don't think it has anything to do with the younger generation. I think it has to do with some of the octogenarians that maybe are in positions they probably shouldn't be in, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. Hey, here's my unpopular opinion. I have faith in the youth. Like, just give them responsibility, man. They'll step up. You know, I mean, that's a much deeper rabbit hole that we can go down. But you know, I am proud of this country and think things are a lot better than a lot of perception out there. And I think there's a lot more good patriotic people out there, even in the younger generation. And you know, we just have to have faith in them. We got to give them responsibility, and I think we'll all be very pleasantly surprised.
And no doubt it's trumped up from the mainstream media, but you know, like they say about,
gotta get some clicks somehow, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, look, there's ebbs and flows with the country. Hard times breed hard men breed good times, and good times unfortunately breed some soft men. And I think we're just in that phase. Unfortunately, we're just gonna get into that flow, or that ebb rather, where we're in a hard time, and just gonna have some hard people that have to stand up and navigate us through the hard times.
It's sad that we're like on the way of being like that grumpy old vet. You know what I'm saying? That has.
I am going to be the greatest old man ever. I'm gonna have like that hat, like Afghan vet, like you see the Vietnam vets.
Gotta
gonna be yelling at the cashier at CVS.
You don't understand.
It's like, you said 15% off veterans discount for batteries, but it's only the store brand, not the Duracell. Like, I'm just gonna be yelling about everything. I'm gonna be a great old man.
Yep. I think we've earned that right, at least.
Yeah.
I think I got one more question for you though, bro.
Yep.
As a Marine officer, better yet, a stellar fucking infantry officer who's faced, significant challenges.
Just gonna turn the light on real quick. One second.
Yeah.
Just realized how dark it got in here. All right, sorry, continue.
I thought you were just getting ominous on us or something with your story. It got a little darker.
I'll go find a hood to put on or something.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, man, I should brighten up in here as well.
But yeah, I mean, just as someone at the top of your game and who's seen significant challenges and significant ebbs and flows, and really the goings on as a Marine officer, what advice would you give maybe a younger Marine that's struggling to persevere through some hardship, going through something similar that you went through?
In essence, the phrase is embrace the suck. And the way I would sort of articulate that is that, when you look at people who you look up to or you admire, that you want to emulate, understand that they were not born that way. They became that through struggle, through pushing through discomfort, through a lot of hardship. You don't become great without a lot of work. You don't become great at anything without a lot of work. There is no shortcuts. And even if you find yourself in a lucky position of some sort of celebritydom that you didn't really deserve, that's not a position you want to be in. That makes for very miserable, unpleasant, insecure people. So what I would say is, hey, seek out the discomfort, seek out the challenges, push yourself. If there are opportunities to do things that you haven't done before, volunteer. Try to seek out those experiences that are hard. You want to find that feeling of, looking at a challenge, like almost kind of being at the base of the mountain, looking up, like, oh God, I don't know if I could do this, and then just doing it. You want to seek out those experiences, because that's how you're going to become a person that is great at something, and that's how you're going to become a person that you can look in the mirror and be proud of.
Wow.
So in succinct form, embrace the suck.
Fucking A. It's a great answer. Okay. You know, I was going to ask you 1,000 other questions about like how you did it, you know, how you know, stayed motivated this whole time. You know, I mean, someone with much lesser of things that went bad for me. I mean, I hardly got through it, dude. And I hear your story and I'm just like, what the fuck? I mean, how the fuck did he do it? I mean, maybe it's just I'm a negative person at the end of the day, or I don't know what, but
Look, and if I'm being completely honest, my path hasn't been perfect. You know, I've made bad decisions in how I've dealt with things at times. You know, I've not necessarily been on a straight and narrow path, you know, post injury. You know, I'm a human being, and
of course.
at one point I finally got therapy and talked to someone. And you know, I have had times where I needed help. So you know, specifically, I remember really good buddy of mine. He was the best man at my wedding, and still will always be a great friend of mine. He was former Navy EOD tech, and we met after the service. We met in New York City, and you know, we hung out and, you know, partied together a lot. And you know, there was one day he just invited me out for a burger, and I'm like, really, just get a burger? Like, we're going out for drinks after that, right? He's like, dude, just you know, it's calm evening. Let's get a burger. I was like, okay. So I sit down, and he just throws these pamphlets on the table and goes, dude, get help. Like,
Really?
yeah. And I was a little puzzled and even offended, but you know, he started talking to me about, you know, some stuff and observations. And in retrospect, the phrase I would use to explain it is, you know, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And so it takes someone on the outside observing you sometimes to sort of pull you aside and go, bro, you need to slow down. Like,
Damn. That just hit home for me, dude. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you.
And I did. So listen, if I'm being honest, like, it's not always been smooth and straight. So, you know,
bro, the fact that you're still here talking to us, though, dude, that's what I'm referring to. So, I mean, hats off to you, bro. I mean, goddamn. Anyone, a lesser person, come on, let's be real, dude. I mean, not everyone gets through something like this, and you did.
I don't know. You keep going. It's, you know, it's my family. It's maybe the way I was raised. It's maybe the people that have been in my life. I don't know. I just know that something I'm really good at is being miserable. I'm really good at being miserable. Like,
Nice.
anyone I know, if any one of us ended up like homeless on the street, I would probably be the most okay with it. For some reason, I'm good at. I'm not always necessarily good at what I'm doing, but I'm good at getting through things because I can just deal with the feeling of being miserable. I don't know.
No, I hear you, dude. Embrace the suck. I get you. Trust me. I hear you. It's something I always pride myself in because I struggle finding positive things about myself. I hate talking about myself or putting myself on a pedestal to, you know, bravo or what have you. I can pick myself up after being dragged on the concrete for a few miles and dust myself off and keep going, where others maybe would not. And that's something I pride myself in. So you got to find something. So yeah, man, you cleared out my fucking book of questions, bro, and you fucking handled it with grace like a gentleman. Dan, you got anything for the fine gentleman in front of us, or
No,
you're
man.
gonna let him go?
I just, yeah. Listen, Nick had some awesome questions. A lot of questions I probably would ask too. I know that we could probably go on about this for another
seriously.
2 hours, and
Yeah.
you know, actually, being that you're so close, man. You said you work in New York City.
Yeah, I do.
So I'm on the other side of the water, man. I'm right. I'm sure you're familiar with some parts of Jersey, Newark Airport being one of them. I'm like, unfortunately, yeah, it's a shithole. But so I live in Cranford, which is probably like 3 miles away from Newark Airport, which means I'm probably like, again, 7 miles away from Manhattan, which means like an hour and a half in street traffic. But I'd love to get together with you, man, and maybe hash some things out, talk a little bit more. I can meet you, bro, and whatever. But again, I'm thankful to be
Now
on
listen,
there,
be
Nick.
careful what you say around them, dude, because it can and will be used in the court of law with this guy. Okay.
Not me. Listen, I'm not a lawyer.
I can cross the Hudson and get a beer. Don't you worry.
There you go.
It'd be better for me to go over to Manhattan or
Even
New York
better.
City, but yeah, man. But the other thing I want to say is Nick. Nick has done a great job, and I think he highlights the things that we need to talk about, man. And I'm so gracious that you did come out and you talked about some things that are very sensitive. I know them the same way, man. And Nick's been pretty good at that. And again, these are things that probably need to be said, but we don't say them. Masculine reasons, alpha male reasons, whatever it is, but things that need to be said. And again, thank you so much for telling your story. You should probably write a book.
Yeah, you should, dude.
Honestly.
Just your humor
and
alone.
I think even probably not as interesting, but interesting enough is your transition from where you were in the Marine Corps to the business sector now and how you got there. I'd be interested in that as well, because I think certainly Marines as Marine officers, we make super good leaders. And I think that kind of translates out into the business world. And I'd be super interested to talk to you about that as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the private sector would probably be equally as interested.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say that a lot of what I took from being a Marine officer has made me much better at my job today. Dude, I am more than happy to talk about this. We need another 2 or 3 hours. Honestly, I probably have a lot more to say about that than I guess the first 2 hours we just went on here. But yeah, more than happy to do that. I am a very easy person to convince to get out for a beer, especially if you're gonna cross the Hudson to, the city. So yeah, man, let's do it.
And Nick is he's up in that other nether region of
where all the good people are. Yes,
the Northeast. Yeah,
Boston,
not
Massachusetts.
far actually. So
yeah.
Nick is.
Oh yeah.
No, James. Actually, we're planning on a little something at the end of April, where a couple of us are congregating down at this guy's house. I would absolutely love to have you come on and maybe have a beer with us. We'll probably have a fire and just talk some shit. But I'd love to introduce you to some of the guys, man, and just bring you around, man. But I once again, I gotta thank you again, man. I know telling stuff like this, what a lot of people don't understand is it just doesn't end when you turn the computer off and you stop the conversation. It follows you around for the rest of the night. So thank you again for putting yourself out there, talking to me and sharing a very, very close story to your heart. And I want to thank you for that. And I hope that we can talk again, man. I hope, honestly, after every one of these podcasts, dude, I mean, I'm not really one to talk. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had many a therapist, so don't think I'm knocking that. But there's something about talking to like-minded individuals that bring out so much more in me. I trust talking around you guys. I know you can completely understand me, and I know nothing is getting lost, talking to you guys. So I want to thank you for just being here with me today. Yeah, I'd love to do another one with you guys. Dan, once again, it's always a pleasure, bro. And James, we'll
love you, man.
I love you too. We'll stay in touch, and hopefully we'll do this again. And this won't be the last time we talk.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, thanks again. I'm gonna get your number from Nick here.
I got you.
Yeah, we'll meet up in the city. Unfortunately, I don't imbibe anymore for some of the reasons that you already highlighted. But I have a club soda. Y'all can
That's fine.
enjoy
We can do
your
that.
beers.
I'll have 2 on you. That's fine. I'll drink your beer.
We can do that.
But there you have it, guys. Captain James Byler for episode 63 of the Hard to Kill podcast, joined from Daniel Donnerstag. Have a good night, everybody. Semper Fidelis.
Semper Fidelis, gents. Yut.
Right.
There we go.